Did you know that J.M. Barrie's original editor for Peter Pan hated the first chapter? He said it was missing a hook. Most writing advice about opening novels goes something like, hook the reader in immediately, which is absolutely true. However, as advice goes, it's a little bit less than practical. Hook the reader is just a description of the outcome that naturally everybody's hoping for. So in this video, we're going to break that down into actual techniques, ways that you can open your novel, what they do, how they achieve it, where the pitfalls are, and examples of books that do them particularly well. By the end of it, you're not just going to know that your opening needs to grab readers, you're going to have a toolkit that will let you do it. Start as close to the inciting incident as possible. This is probably the most fundamental piece of advice for any writer looking at a blank page and wondering where to start. Every story has an inciting incident, that event that sets everything into motion. The moment that Katniss Everdeen's sister's name gets drawn at the reaping. The morning that Nick Carraway drives across the bay to Gatsby's party for the very first time. The day that Frodo inherits the ring. In 99% of the cases, the best piece of advice we could give you is to start your story as close to that inciting incident as possible. Readers will get impatient, and because we live in the future, that will only get worse as time goes by. Before the world of your story becomes a place that readers want to live in it, you're asking them to invest themselves in fictional strangers. The quicker you can get to the thing that makes your story a story, the sooner you will give your readers a reason to stay. Which brings me to the prologue question, because this is something we always get asked about. Are prologues good? Are they acceptable? Should I be doing a prologue? Writing is of course a creative art, so anything is allowed. And anything is good if executed well. I'll tell you now, personally I'm not a fan of prologues, and a lot of the editors and agents I've spoken to will roll their eyes if they open up a sample chapter and see that it is a prologue. Yes, some writers pull them off beautifully, but as a general rule, and I say this with all the love in the world, prologues often happen when a writer doesn't trust their readers to keep up. Will they care about my story if they don't know the long history behind the Stone of Aberath? How hundreds of soldiers died to keep it safe from the Emperor of the Western Skies? Will readers understand how important this artifact is if I don't fill them in on how the Gilligo artificers developed a new form of concrete to keep it safe? Many writers have this urge to include a world-building prologue that makes readers sit through 5 pages of geography and dynastic history before we've met a single character that we're meant to care about. I mentioned a moment ago that Lord of the Rings starts on the day that Frodo inherits the ring, which actually is a bit of a lie. The opening of that particular book is actually a series of prologues that explains hobbits and pipeweed, and the geography of the Shire, and then a recap of the book The Hobbit. Tolkienites will argue the livelong day that all of this is essential as it demonstrates the scale of the journey that Frodo's about to take, but I would argue that a lot of it can be inferred, and the important bits could probably be folded into the first few chapters, and the rest of it, well, it probably could have been cut. Readers are extraordinarily good at picking up context from within a story. So long as you give them something to be curious about, they will follow you through the fog. The books that do this the best will drop you straight in and trust you to orient yourself. The Hunger Games doesn't open with an explanation of Panem and the degradation of the United States. It opens on a regular day for Katniss. Harry Potter doesn't open with a history of Voldemort and how he almost took over the world with the Death Eaters. It opens with the Dursleys and something strange in the air, and an owl in broad daylight. Readers love piecing a world together as it's slowly revealed through its relevance to our characters. So, start close to the inciting incident and maybe forget the prologue. Open with action. Now, open with action is a piece of advice that's often misread as open with a chase scene or open with a fight. What it means is actually a lot simpler. Just open with something happening, something with movement, something with tension or curiosity that lets people grab onto it, because at this point they probably don't know who the characters are yet. Think about how a James Bond film works. In every Bond film, before the opening sequence, we have this action sequence that almost has nothing to do with the main plot. It's a standalone action set piece complete to itself. The reason those sequences exist is to assure the audience that this is going to be an action-packed film, because if we're being honest, the first act of every single Bond film is a lot of table setting. Bond goes to meet his boss, learns about a new threat, gets some gadgets. It's all really kind of slow and a little bit dull most of the time. Of course, this doesn't just apply to thrillers and adventure books. Opening with action doesn't need explosions. It just needs something engaging, something that will make the reader want to turn the page because something exciting is happening. Ian McEwan's Enduring Love is fundamentally a novel about ideas. It's about rationalism, obsession, and guilt, but it opens with a hot air balloon breaking loose across the Chilterns, a group of strangers sprinting across a field to grab the ropes, and one man falling to his death. It's kinetic and emotionally enormous, and it has to be, because everything that follows, all the psychological weight of the story, is only possible because McEwan has made you feel the stakes. By being so explosive, it promises that the aftershock, the story that follows, will be equally profound. So the practical question to ask for your own opening is something happening on page 1? Is there a situation unfolding in front of us in the present tense of the story? If not, should there be? In medias res. Okay, let's take a quick detour at a device that you'll sometimes see in TV shows and movies and books. That's when things start in medias res. That's Latin for into the middle of things. It describes a specific technique, starting your story in the middle of an action or scene, and then going back and filling in what led them all there. Homer used it in the Odyssey. We meet Odysseus 10 years into his journey home before he eventually recounts his experiences since the end of the Trojan War. Experiences that include fighting a cyclops, meeting lovely ladies, and watching his crew turn into pigs. The appeal is that it creates immediate momentum and intrigue. The reader is dropped straight into something in motion which makes them want to understand it. Why is she running away? Who's after them? What's so important about this briefcase? And as the story progresses, the reader is shown things that allows them to piece things together until everything makes sense by the time we get back to the middle, or should we say the beginning. Bear in mind that this technique perhaps has been a little overused, and it can be a little bit dull if all the reveals are too straightforward. If Odysseus' account of why he hasn't managed to make his way home yet is just filled with stories of poor weather and bad navigation, then the reader would probably not stick around to find out whether he gets home to his family or not. The other pitfall is what some writers and editors call the flashback trap. So you create urgency by starting the story in the present, and you just keep flashing back to more interesting stuff. And meanwhile, in the present, nothing really happens. You just have characters sitting back listening to the story and stroking their chin. So, starting in medias res is a big swing. If you choose to open your book this way, buyer beware. Introduce characters by desire, not description. In almost every early draft, character descriptions go on for way too long. New writers are often compelled to describe their protagonists thoroughly enough for the readers to get a solid picture of what they look like. We talk about hair color, eye color, height, the way they hold themselves. The problem isn't that this information is useless, sometimes it's very relevant. Is that it tells us almost nothing about who the character is. Think about how you would start telling any anecdote. You might go, hey, have I told you about my friend Gary who's obsessed with Fuji apples? Or have I ever mentioned Michelle, that girl I went to school with who once signed up to a rural beauty pageant hundreds of miles from where she lived? Those are interesting details. On the other hand, you'll be absolutely mad to start an anecdote with, oh, this reminds me of my friend Glenn. He's 5'10", heavyset, walks with a limp, sandy hair. Anyway, he once gave me a gumball machine for my birthday. What actually makes a character come alive on the page is, what do they want? What are their desires? What is their relationship to the world around them? Thinking back to an earlier section, just ask yourself what is happening in this scene. There doesn't need to be a thrilling balloon chase. Sometimes all you need for a compelling scene is one character trying to do something and struggling. In Sally Rooney's Normal People, we're introduced to our main characters Connell and Marianne through their personal dynamic. Connell arrives at Marianne's house, they go to the same school, and Connell's mother is Marianne's housekeeper. So already we have this status and power dynamic. From the start we can see that Connell just wants to fetch his mother and get out of there quickly and engage with Marianne as little as possible. Marianne, on the other hand, is trying to get a reaction out of him, teasing him, pointing out that he did better than her in an English exam, joking that his English teacher must fancy him, which of course makes him blush. From his behaviour, from what he's trying to do, even though it's ever so small, we see that Connell has a crush on Marianne, and by her behaviour, she's perhaps welcoming this. The engine of this whole novel, their interplay and dynamic, is established in this very first scene, established purely through behaviour. We don't know what their faces and bodies look like yet, but we know what they are like because of their desires in this simple scene. Connell doesn't want to be seen by Marianne. Marianne wants to be seen by Connell. So, to sum it up, when you're introducing your protagonists, ask not what do they look like, ask what do they want right now in this very scene. Enter through character voice. This is a technique that works particularly well in first-person narratives. We're talking about books where we're going to spend an entire novel in one character's head. When you open through voice, you're essentially making your readers a promise. This is who we are going to be with for the next 300 pages. Their way of seeing things, their sense of humor or lack of it, their particular way of narrating a world. This is what you are signing up for, and this is what we are going to deliver. And if that voice is distinct and compelling enough with a unique enough worldview, readers will follow it almost anywhere. Think about how Holden Caulfield introduces himself in The Catcher in the Rye. His introduction is all voice. He tells you in the first paragraph roughly what kind of person he is and exactly the kind of story that he's not going to tell you. We quickly get to know him. His voice, his attitude, his suspicion of the world, his disdain for phonies. He's by no means a pleasant young man, and I think most readers would agree that you would not want to spend any meaningful amount of time with him. But on the page, he is a compelling personality that we are interested in. And part of the excitement of reading a story like this is seeing how he will filter the world around him through that particular lens of his personality. Voice as an opening works best when it reveals how someone genuinely views the world, including the strange, the unglamorous, or the awkward parts. If you're enjoying this so far, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. We put out lots of great stuff on writing and publishing every single week. Open with a thought or philosophy. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. You know that one. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Instead of opening with an action or a character or even a scene, Austen is starting with a thought or philosophy, an observation about the world that the book inhabits. And in doing so, she's pretty much telling you everything that you need to know that matters to the book. Opening with a thought or a philosophical statement establishes the book's perspective, its thesis, if you will. Tolstoy does the same thing with the opening of Anna Karenina. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Again, it's not just memorable, it's the theme of the whole book summed up in a pithy statement. It's about two different couples looking for love and meaning, and their own unique struggles in that journey. Yes, I'm sure scholars of Russian literature will be appalled by my simplification of Anna Karenina. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. All of this happened, more or less. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which is a perfect opening for a book that deals with an unreliable narration. Of course, the risk of starting with a philosophical opening is that if it isn't quite sharp enough, that it'll come across as completely pretentious. So the thought itself has to be interesting or well observed or contain some sort of tension within itself. Because if it's vague or self-important, then there's a good chance you'll lose people before the end of the first paragraph. Every great opening is making a promise. I'm not saying that you have to state your theme on the first page, but you are making an implicit contract with your reader. A contract about what the thing they're about to read is all about. Is it funny? Is it smart? Who's it going to be about, and who are they? Am I going to be living inside a character's head, or am I going to be ushered through a new fantastical world? Whatever your answer is, your opening should reflect that. Also, how you open your book matters beyond the first chapter. Agents, publishers, readers at a bookshop are all making decisions based on a relatively small amount of text. A decision which is basically, am I going to invest my time and money in this work? Your opening needs to signal competence. It's got to earn the reader's trust and make them want to know what happens next. If you're working on a novel and want expert eyes on it, including your opening, Reedsy has over 1,700 editors, many of them with Big Five experience working across every genre. You can find them right here in the marketplace. I've dropped a link in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this. Remember to like the video and smash the subscribe button. I've been Martin from Reedsy, and I'll see you on the shelves.